Hello people of YouTube, it's Deepak here, and welcome to DCS World 2.5.6 and Razbam Sim's AV8B Harrier module. This is tutorial 3, the navigation tutorial for the Harrier, and I'll go over the standard navigational instruments and sources used on the Harrier. For starters, we're going to look at the EHSD. I'm just going to clear the left MPCD here for a moment to show you one of the easiest ways of accessing the EHSD. On your sensor select switch, if you push left short, it will display the EHSD on your left MPCD. If you press it again, it will decenter the display and show you further ahead. If you press it once more, a third press, you'll get the EW page, and pressing it again will take you back to the normal EHSD page. It's also possible to access it by pressing the bottom middle button labelled Menu, and from the main menu choosing EHSD on the left hand side. Both of these methods effectively do the exact same thing. Okay, so this is the standard display. I've not changed anything at all, so I'm going to take you through all of the elements of this display here. In the middle you have your aircraft icon. It shows your current aircraft position. Left hand side is your ground track, right hand side is your ground speed in knots. This line here is called your ground track, so this is the direction you're travelling over the ground. This pointer here on the inside of the heading tape with an O is your waypoint heading, basically pointing directly to your currently selected waypoint. The pointer here with a T is your TACAN, that's your currently tuned TACAN. Top right is heading, distance and time to arrive at your currently selected waypoint. Top left is heading, distance and time to arrive for your currently tuned TACAN. Bottom right is your currently selected course. Bottom left is your currently selected range scale in nautical miles, and it's currently 25 nautical miles. And then, like I said, this circle around the outside is the heading tape. It shows you, it's basically a very easy way to reference direction in relation to the map. On the left hand side, where it says Map M, this is the Map Modes push button. If we press that, we're presented with a series of options which controls the display. If you don't press anything for a few seconds, it takes you back to the normal main display. So I'll take you through each of the options in Map Modes. If we click here, the very first one is Sequence. With that boxed, all of your waypoints will be displayed in sequence on the screen. True will toggle between magnetic and true headings. You also get a T at the top of the display when you're in true mode, just to confirm that. Track hides or displays the ground track line from your aircraft. Scale, and actually this is always here whether you're in map mode or not, scale will flip through the different radar scales, including an option called automatic, where it will automatically change the range scale to include your currently selected navigation source. I'm going to reduce that back down to 25. The next option in map modes is zoom. Zoom will half whatever current scale you're in, and that's confirmed with a Z next to scale. So again, I can flip through these and they now become 50, 13, 6, 3, and this can give you a very detailed zoomed in view on the underlying map. If I choose map mode and unbox zoom, we're back into the normal modes. Next we have colour. This allows you to cycle the symbology colours. Sometimes that's useful if the map makes use of particular colours that are similar to the font colour. N up changes you into north up mode, so you can toggle between aircraft heading and north up. Decenter, it doesn't actually work using the push button, however it does work, as I mentioned before, using sensor select left, that's the decentered view, and an EW and it back. We then have overlays. Overlay 1 is tanker positions if they're pre-programmed. Overlay 2 is your entire flight plan displayed as lines. Map toggles the map background on and off, and EHSI toggles the heading ring and the pointers. Below map modes we have the data page. When we have data page selected, the text changes to warn us that we are in a mode where we can actually alter the saved data in the system, and it has a series of pages across the bottom. The first one being Waypoint, the next one being TACAN, and the third one being Aircraft. In Aircraft mode, we're able to change the aircraft's currently defined position, and this would normally only ever be done during INS alignment, as covered in Tutorial 1. TACAN will display the 5 closest TACAN stations, and you have the ability to see the channel and its name. And then Waypoint is the most commonly used one. In Waypoint mode, the map display will be centered on the currently selected waypoint, which in this case is Waypoint 1, and paging through waypoints will move the circle to each waypoint in turn. Okay, and that's data mode. Now, standard usage of the EHSD is for deciding what navigation source you're going to use for navigating the aircraft. And the most commonly used ones are Waypoint, as currently boxed, TACAN, which will use the currently selected TACAN station, and AWLS, which is a landing system akin to ILS. So to demonstrate, I'm going to switch us back to Waypoint. You see here that we have the waypoint indicator, and if we zoom out enough, we also get a circle. If we take a little look on the HUD, the circle is also positioned on the HUD, showing the waypoint location, and there's also a vertical line present on the heading tape across the top of the HUD. On the right hand side of the HUD, we have distance, in this case 34.4 nautical miles. We're in waypoint navigation mode, which we'll cover later. There are some other modes. We're currently in waypoint, and we have waypoint 1 selected. That's all the information that you have for navigating using the heads-up display there. We can change waypoints by using the up and down arrows present on the right-hand side of the EHSD, as so. And you can see that the pointer and the circle moves, but we're in auto scale mode, so it's actually changing the scale to keep the waypoint within the view. So I'm going to put it back to waypoint 1. The other option that we have is the waypoint increment button on your HOTAS. Each time you press it, it will go forwards 1 waypoint in your database, and it wraps around back to number 1 after you go off the end. The last way that you can change your current waypoint, I'm going to have to zoom out a little to show you this, is using the quick access function. If you press and hold waypoint increment for more than a second at release, you get this display on your ODU, and you can choose between waypoints, mark points, and target points. Whichever one you select, it shows you the currently selected waypoint, in this case number 1. Say we wanted to quickly select waypoint 2, we would simply enter 2, enter, and as you can see on the EHSD, we've immediately switched to waypoint 2. Lastly, in relation to the waypoint system, it also supports something called Waypoint Offsets. Now this would most commonly be used with bullseye calls. In this case, waypoint 1 is actually co-located with our bullseye. If we received a waypoint call from Wingman, say he'd spotted a SAM site at Bulls 220 5 miles, we could enter that into our system, referencing waypoint 1, which we know is the bullseye. We simply press Data, and with waypoint 1 selected, we press Waypoint on the ODU, and it changes to Waypoint Offset. We'd enter the bearing, 220, enter, and the range, 5, enter. And we now have a waypoint offset associated with waypoint 1. If we come out of the data page, we'll now notice a new label on this push button here, Waypoint Offset. It's only present on waypoints that have an offset, so that will appear when waypoint 1 is selected. If I zoom out a little bit, you'll see that now not only do we have waypoint 1 shown as a circle, but we also have a dashed circle here. This is the offset. If I box waypoint offset, the offset is now the actual navigation source. And again, if I go up to the HUD, you'll see now the circle has shifted left, and on the bearing, it's showing that we need to turn left, and we have a different range displayed. It says waypoint offset, waypoint 1. So you can see that the navigation mode has changed from waypoint to waypoint offset. If we wanted to use TACAN as our navigational source, we simply press TACAN. That will change the information on the HUD again. So it's now instructing us to turn left to bearing 218. It also shows us a range. It says DME. That's because this is not in nautical miles, but actually in meters. So it's a much larger number than we'd normally have. And also we can set AWLS as our navigational source. And this works in a very similar fashion to TACAN. In this example, as I mentioned, waypoint 1 is co-located with the bullseye. This is loaded into the aircraft at the mission planning phase, in the real world using a data cartridge, but in our case we would set it in the mission editor. With a bullseye position set, we also get on-ship bullseye position information on the HUD, here at the bottom left. So this is currently telling us that we are bullseye 086 for 33.1 miles. So if we get ray gun calls from friendly aircraft, we could use this to compare and make sure that they're not locking us up. Of course, our radar warning receiver would also give the game away, but this helps a little. We also have mark points in the navigation system. We can create a mark point underneath our aircraft's current position by pressing this button here, which is currently labelled MK0. If I press that, that creates mark point 0 and it immediately increments to MK1. We can have 30 mark points in the system, and each time we press it we create a new one. We can get to those mark points by going down off the bottom of the first waypoint. You can see here I now have MK0 selected. Alternatively, you can press waypoint increment on your HOTAS. You'll go to mark points after you come off the end of your last waypoint. Or, as I showed you before, a long press of waypoint increment takes you to the quick access screen. You can choose mark point, and in this case it's mark point 0. So we press 0, enter, and mark point 0 is immediately selected. I'll demonstrate that again. 0, enter, we now have mark point 0 selected. Or we could go waypoint 1, enter, to immediately go back to waypoint 1. The last thing that we can do on the EHSD main display is we can change the navigational position information. It's displayed at the bottom right. Currently position is via INS. If I press this, it'll switch to GPS, and we can flip between those two. In IFA mode, the INS and GPS position should always be the same, because in that mode they're coupled. However, if you should have a system failure or a loss of GPS signal, you may need to switch between these two. There's also the possibility to designate a waypoint as a target point. So for example, we have a target at waypoint 3. With waypoint 3 selected, we press designate, and it will box and it will show that the steer point is currently the designated target point. We then have a diamond on the screen and we can queue weapons to that location. Pressing designate again will undesignate. Next, we'll take a look at the timer functions in the Harrier. These can be accessed by pressing the timer button on the UFC. From here, we have access to a stopwatch, as well as a time to target and time on target functionality. The stopwatch is pretty simple. You click stopwatch, it zeroes the display on the UFC, and if you press it again, the timer begins. Something else that you can do is if you're looking on the HUD, you can press the on-off button on the UFC, and now your stopwatch is displayed up here on the HUD as well. If we press on-off again, it will be back to the normal clock on the HUD, but the timer will continue to run on the UFC. You can pause the stopwatch by clicking stopwatch again, and it will pause at the current value. If I press it again, it will start from that position. We can also lap the stopwatch by clicking lap. LP will be displayed on the left hand side of the UFC. The timer will be frozen on the screen, but in the background it will actually be continuing to run. If I click lap again, lap will be disabled and it will take us right back to the original display. If I now click stopwatch again, once again to pause it, you'll see that below we have the option to reset. Clicking reset resets the stopwatch back to 0. Also, in the timer screen we have the time to target and time on target functionality. This is for coordinating an attack on a given waypoint, and it is always referenced to the currently selected waypoint. So we're going to have waypoint 1 selected, we're going to do time to target, and we're going to enter 2.00 for 2 minutes, enter, and it will immediately begin counting up to the 2 minutes. Now you can do it this way, or you can click hack. And in fact, hack can be pressed before as well. So you decide what your reference time is, but it doesn't count until hack. And in a flight, usually the flight leader would call hack on the radio to create a time marker. So you can now see that we've selected 2 minutes and it's counting down. Pressing CS/T will display the commanded speed in order to arrive at that waypoint on time. You can see it's counting up because we're in active pause. Also, if we take a little look at the HUD, we now have a caret displayed underneath speed, and this is showing us the caret represents our current speed. The line is the speed we need to be flying at, so it's telling us currently we're too slow, and we can confirm that with the UFC. It says we should be over 800 knots, which in the Harrier is not possible. So anyway, we would want to accelerate until the caret lined up with the line, and that would allow us to arrive on target on time. I'm going to go back to TTT. And alternatively, we can select a time on target. So if I choose time on target, it's at first going to display the current time, and this is in UTC. We have the option of selecting local time by clicking real. Real will display the local time. We're going to use UTC though. Current time is 07:27 and 22 seconds. Let's say we want to arrive at the target at 07:31. We can do this by selecting time on target 07:3100, enter, and we have now set the exact time we want to arrive. Again, we can choose CS/T to display on the UFC the time, and as with TTT, we have the caret displayed underneath the speed. Fly to put the caret on the line, and you will arrive on target at your coordinated time. The Harrier has a basic autopilot system called the Automatic Flight Control System. It's basically auto-trimming with one additional mode. It's activated by flipping this switch here into the forward position. When you're in this mode, the stick is still active, and small movements of the stick will actually adjust the aircraft's attitude, and it will actually maintain that attitude. I can demonstrate. If I disengage the active pause. So the aircraft is currently in AFC. I'm just going to verify. Yes, it is. I can move the stick, so let's enter a slight roll and then let go. The aircraft will now maintain that roll and pitch position indefinitely. We can also, if we want to make very small adjustments, use the trim. If I trim nose down, I can put the aircraft almost level. It's in a slight climb, and the same applies to roll. If I apply a little bit of right trim, I can adjust very finely the currently held position. In addition to this mode, the aircraft has an altitude hold mode. If I engage that switch, you'll see that the aircraft will now maintain this current altitude indefinitely, still with the ability to roll the aircraft and maintain a turn. These are the only modes that the autopilot has. Note also the AFC adjusts the trim to a neutral position, and so if you have an asymmetric load, engaging AFC and then disengaging it again after a period will leave you in a perfectly trimmed situation. I would recommend mapping these two switches to your HOTAS. It's very useful to be able to switch them on and off using HOTAS buttons. Lastly, the aircraft has a page which you can display on the MPCDs called VREST. VREST stands for the Vertical, Short Takeoff and Landing, Range, Endurance, Speed and Time page, which allows you to determine the operational capabilities of your aircraft. If I go to the main menu here on the right MPCD and choose VREST, the option that we're interested in cruising or navigating flight is the cruise page. With the cruise page selected, you'll see that we have two columns here, ACR and OPCR. ACR is our actual cruise using our current parameters, and OPCR is our optimal cruise. So we can see here that we're currently at 450 knots, Mach 0.71, that's our current altitude, that's the range to the currently selected waypoint, and it tells us the remaining fuel that we will have when we reach that waypoint, in this case £2,000. Maximum range that can be achieved if we maintain this profile is 250 nautical miles, it says here, and it also tells us the current wind using the INS unit. Optimally, we would want to be flying at 231 knots at an altitude of 36,000 feet. That would mean that we'd arrive at waypoint 1 with almost £7,000 of fuel remaining, and we could achieve a maximum range of 744 nautical miles. It also gives us a countdown of our total gross weight. This is quite useful for landing calculations. We also have our drag index here. This is a function of what's hanging on the pylons. And that concludes an overview of all of the navigational equipment on the AV8B. I hope that you all enjoyed that, and I'll speak to you all next time.